So I don't think I've actually really done a talk to the camera piece before. Um, One thing I tell people when they ask about various things is that usually I say I'm not a fan. So what I mean by that is usually when I'm, say, listening to music, it's the music I like. I don't really worry about who made it. So, for instance, if it's a particular group, um, I'm not usually aware of the lineup of that particular album, since I typically listen to albums only. Or I don't know the ins and outs of what they've been doing, the players have been doing on social media. Um, and so that's sort of typical what I mean by not a fan. So that so I'm it's the media or the product that I'm more interested in, not the brand who made it. So if I like X, do I care about who made X? Typically, no. And that basically means that uh, when it comes to things like team sports, I have no idea who plays what. It's just, it's entertainment. Obviously, a lot of people make a lot of money in that sport because it's entertaining enough to be broadcast, say, on TV, etc. But in terms of actual being a fan of a team or a product or that I just doesn't make sense to me. And that's probably partly due to the way I grew up, is that I was more interested in how things worked rather than memorizing stuff. So things that could be worked out how they worked. So electronics and things like that as a hobby were very interesting to me, and they became eventually from a hobby to went to college and then became a career. So in most of the things I'm good at, I think I'm good at. Typically, there are like a few underlying principles, and you can sort of work most things out from scratch. I don't try to memorize a large amount of stuff. The only time I've memorized stuff I've found is just because of pure repetition. And in order to do repetition, I have to be doing something that I'm interested in doing. So, for instance, yes, if you know what a TTL logic chip is, like a 7400 gate quad to input NAND gate, if you know what that is, I know the pinouts. I can work with the pinouts from the top view and then from the underside view, etc. So I know sort of a number of chips I used to use a lot when I was in my 20s, just as a hobby. And that's the sort of thing I'm good at memorizing, but not because I have an interest in the subject per se. It's just that through repetition, it's stuck. It's like an old credit card number, 49298619466669. I actually was determined one day to memorize that. It has no use because it obviously doesn't mean anything nowadays. Doesn't even have enough digits for a modern credit card. But it was a number, and I decided I would memorize that. So one of the things I found over the years is that I've always been a very impatient person. And that means typically I'm not good at planning, because that's to do with things in the future. I'm very much a spontaneous type ideas person. It's sort of hard to convey, but for instance, I had no control of where we lived when I was young, because in the sense that we were a military family. I was a military brat from the Royal Air Force, so I got to live in places like Australia, Singapore when I was younger. I had no choice in that. And one of the side effects of that is that my father was only a sergeant. Well, he was a chief technician eventually. he wasn't an officer. And so that had sort of subtle things at school where some kids were officers' kids, some kids weren't. And I think somehow that rubbed off on me in certain ways. And being impatient means that basically I want to get things done. I'm not a perfectionist because that takes way too long. I'm sort of more of an 80-20 type person. So I try to get 80% done in 20% of the time. And for a lot of applications and things, that's definitely good enough. So sometimes these projects I'm doing here for electronics or software, what I typically do is I try to set myself, say, initially, say, an hour, and see how much I can get done in an hour. And that's usually a good enough indication as to whether if I'm still doing it after an hour, I can keep going for a little bit longer, but sometimes I'll just put it down because either it's just getting too tedious or it's going to work well enough at that point that I can stop and think about what I want to do with it. So subsequently, even things like these videos, they're not polished. They're typically lightly edited because that takes time, and I'm just a really impatient person most of the time. So not a fan basically is, let's go back, is I don't try to memorize a lot of things about who made something or why they made it. Doesn't mean that I'm not aware of some of the people who worked on it, but as an example, typically prog rock like Yes, the pop group. I know that some people played in it. Did I realize that they only played on certain albums? Probably not. I don't. But on the other hand, recently, as I've in the last 12 years or so, I've become much more aware of the people in these environments through basically starting up doing things like Moog Fest back in 2012, where I just recently sort of got interested in electronic music again, well, not electronic hardware again. I'd always been interested in electronic music for some reason. And that meant, I started meeting people by going to subsequent conferences and started meeting some of the people behind the music I liked, behind the instruments that I liked that the people who are making music were using, such as Moog, ARP, etc. And meeting the people who currently make, say, some of the Moog instruments through the engineering tracts and things. And so, having resurrected my electronics hobby back in 2012, mostly to try and get my kids interested in it, it meant that I got to meet a lot of people in the industry. And so I would freely admit that some of the people, I didn't know who they were. I had to go back and look them up and research them. And nowadays it turns out that through my friends on Facebook and contacts I've made, even Facebook now starts to say I should try to become friends with these people and in terms of bands I really like, people who are kind of performing with them, and it's been a very interesting 12 years. Yes, 12 years almost. Let's say 11 years since I took this hobby back up again. So, say not a fan is just basically means at one level you're not tied into brands. So I don't care whose breakfast cereal I eat in terms of, is it store brand? Is it a well-known brand? If I like it, I like it. If I don't like it, then that's fine. I just don't buy it again. Um, it sort of vaguely rubs off in other areas like advertising. I have no interest in advertising. Um, so yeah, I don't care whose car makes the car I drive. I don't care what color it is. A car for me is just a way of moving from A to B and B to A. As long as it's reliable and affordable, then yeah, I just use it. Who makes it? It doesn't. I don't need to know that. Obviously, people who make cars for a living would rather me buy their brand, but there's a lot of brands to go around, and I only buy a car once every, I'd say, 10 years, 20 years. Basically, I drive them till a scrap machine, scrap merchant fodder. So it's typically 250,000 miles per vehicle. So don't get through them very often. So when people ask me, when I came to the States, one of the things obviously I knew nothing about the sort of the American pastimes like baseball or American football, and I still don't. I enjoy watching it; it's entertaining. I like it when there are two equally matched teams rather than a one-sided match. Do I really care who wins? No. As long as it's an entertainment. I don't see any point in having, feeling bad because Team A lost or feeling good because Team B won. That doesn't seem worthwhile. So I do have, some preferences, not necessarily because I really believe something's better than something else. Sometimes it's just ordering. Maybe I met or encountered A first and then B, and therefore I have a preference for A. This is sort of just typical of how we all live in a world where time sort of moves forwards, but for some of us, different events occur at different times, like I call the eddies in the flow of time. So just like a stream, as it goes along, it might encounter some turbulence and form little vortices. So if you drop something in like a ship, a little toy boat in the water, it doesn't go a straight line, it goes all over the place. Well, for each of us, our timelines do that. So you might see a certain band or hear music or witness an event, and other people around you will have a different sequence. And that's just who we are. That our timelines make us unique. So part of that is that when you say you like something, that's great. Doesn't mean, and you want to share that with someone else. You do have to think about the fact that someone else may have already encountered that, or they might not have encountered it, but when they do, it doesn't have the same impact on them because they haven't had the same life you've had. Likewise, things you don't like. A lot of things I don't like, but they're popular in other sectors of society. So that's the way it is. One of the things I noticed, I've not felt, rewind, that's not right. When I was a teenager in the 70s, I had the privilege, yes, of having a father who had subscriptions to things like Wireless World, Practical Electronics, and those sort of magazines of that type, which were very much feeding into my desire for understanding of how things worked. And he also had some components, and and occasionally we would get someone bring in a radio or a TV, mostly radios, both transistor and valve or slash tube. And we try to fix them, preferably. Or sometimes they just give us for scrap. And then we would take the components out and see if, looking at the circuits in these magazines, and see what we could do with them. And that electronics hobby slowly morphed into the early digital electronics, and so some of the early computer chips, which then led me to go eventually to university and do a computer science degree. Now again, I was impatient, so I didn't plan much. I had no drive, no thoughts that I was going to do this. I didn't think I was going to go into a career. I thought maybe I'd be a TV repairman, because I knew how to do that. No idea, no plans to go to university, no plans typically, because at one level I don't plan. It just seems to be a way of things just seem to happen. So I know that I did computer science at what's called an A level, which was like last 2 years of high school in America would be, as an elective. And that's reason because we were a boys only grammar school. And the thing about the computer science course was that there was girls from the girls' high school came down, and it was a joint class. So yeah, that was definitely a class worth taking. And so, having done 2 years of computer science at high school in the mid 70s, you apply to go to university. So I applied. I hadn't planned. I didn't think I'd do anything like that. And I got accepted into a university which they just had their first graduates in computer science. So timing is everything. And given how wealthy my family wasn't, I got what's called a full college grant. So I was able to go to college, didn't have to basically pay anything. I think I got a credit card while I was there through the bank my dad banked with. And so I came out of university with a degree, and I think about £1,000 in debt. Yeah, about £1,000. And it's my hobby. Became my what I did at university, and then through the hobby in the university, I was offered a job at the university, doing basically the same, doing my hobby basically. So that lasted another 15 years. So as much as you want to plan ahead, it's not required. You don't have to say, I need a drive, do this, 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 and this, in order to have a decent life. You just have to be aware of opportunities. Sometimes they just are not even choices you consciously make. I mean, only reason I didn't leave school at 16 was I hadn't lined up any form of employment, because you could leave at 16 when I was at school. And so I stayed on for another 2 years because it was paid for, basically. It was nothing, didn't have to do anything different, just turn up. And because for the A levels, you had to pick some subjects, I just picked the 4 best ones I was good at, which turned out to be double math, physics, and computer science. Well, computer science didn't know. I knew I did it as electronics, and I was doing it as a hobby, and so I did end up passing the O and A level for that. And probably because the university was still staffing up, I was offered 2 C's, which I got without problem, and so I ended up going to university. So this is means it shows that you don't have to say you don't have to have drive. You don't have to have a lot of goals, but you do have to be aware of what's going on around you. Um, so, for instance, whilst I was at university as a employee, sorry, working for the computer center, we added some new computers from a different manufacturer, and they had a user group which had a lot of free software. Free is always good, and so I joined that user group. And at one meeting, someone said he had to step down as being organizer for the UK chapter of that particular subject. And there's like 5 of us in the room, and no one else raised their hand as taking over, so I took over. And so I had no plans to do that, but I did it anyway. And after about a year doing that, I got to go to a couple of conferences in the UK for the DECUS user group, for the UK DECUS user group. And then I was asked if I want to do that at the European level. So I thought, why not? It's just a matter of organising conference streams and then basically going to the conference. And the conferences for DECUS first one was in south of France at Cannes, which is very nice, and the second one was at The Hague. So that was pretty good too. And what I didn't know at the time, for instance, was that the special interest group chair people like myself were sent by DECUS Europe to the American conference. So I got to go to America for free, paid for by the DEC user group as part of the conference planning. So, they never had an idea I was going to end up traveling to America. Never wasn't on my on my horizon. But there I was. I was in Atlanta, having breakfast, trying to work out what the waiter was saying, even though we were normally both speaking English. So it was good fun. And so there, so things just happened like that. So having gone to being sent to America, I met people, and they said, well, next time you're over here, stay longer because it doesn't cost anything extra to stay, say, a week longer. So I did that. Next time I went over, stayed a week with some friends. Friends eventually changed jobs to a different company. Completely out of randomly, the company was also setting up an office about a mile from where I lived in London. How would you plan that? So I got to chat with the people who own this company in London, and they asked me to look at doing some software that was not exportable from the US, but could I sort of do an implementation of it? And so I was able to look around on what was available in Europe. The specifications were available, so I implemented it, and obviously that left an impression, because the following year I was over in America and visiting one of my friends, and basically said, we're looking to staff up, do you want a job? So I interviewed with them, and 14 weeks later I had an H-1B visa in my hand, and I moved to America. Again, I had no plans to emigrate to America. Planning and having goals is useful if you really don't know what you want to do, but just doing things you're interested in and being aware of things around you. I think the thing is you have to be careful not to be too focused, and allow yourself to try things out that you hadn't really thought about, I'm very shy. I was a very shy person. I found it very hard to talk to people for the first time. I'm very slow to get to know people, um, and that has different side effects. I tend to babble a lot when I'm talking, um, and doing things like being volunteering to run helping to help with a conference meant that during the conference I was there at the up on the dais, and I realized, oh, I'm supposed to do something here. I'm supposed to introduce the speaker. I'm supposed to do this, and having a role suddenly meant that I was no longer shy, at least speaking in public, like I'm speaking now. Right? I don't know who I'm talking to now. I don't know when you are watching this in the future. I expect about 30 people will watch it in the first 6 months. Typically, that's how many viewers I have. I don't really think it's going to be any more than that. But anyway, most of the people who are watching this have probably met me already. There's no new sort of real content here. But this is mostly for my benefit and for my family. So that one of the things I realized when my mother passed away in basically 1988-ish, 88, yeah, I think it was. Although I had a video camera, when she passed away, I realized I didn't have any footage of her on video. I had, but for various reasons, I'd over-recorded the video of her with other programs. I was sort of, at that point, basically sort of check to check, and the £5 it cost for a new blank videotape was something sort of I really had to think about, and so I generally didn't bother. I had a certain number of tapes, and I went round and sadly, one of the things that I obviously had overwritten at some point was a videotape of my mother. So I never had her on videotape. So that's one of the things I regret being when I was, quote, poor, unquote. You don't have this, you don't know in advance when these things are going to happen. And so part of this video is to do with legacy, and we're all getting older. People have injuries. They have accidents. I don't know for most people here on this, if it's being watched, you've probably had a friend on Facebook, and then go to wish them a happy birthday, and someone maybe says, "Oh, sorry, they passed away a year ago," or whatever. It's happened to me a couple of times. I know that on Twitter there are at least 4 people in my followers list who are dead. Obviously, those accounts are not going to go away, apparently. So yeah, it's, some of what I've just said is to do with legacy. Some of which is just a point of view I don't see talked about a lot. The fact that people will talk about having goals and having things mapped out, what they want to do, and for me it hasn't been that way. I haven't really had that drive. Being impatient, I say I don't plan ahead too far. So even something simple like buying tickets for a concert in 6 months' time is hard for me to do. I can't explain how you feel impatient in that sense, but it does. I do, and so it's sort of thing I sort of don't plan that far ahead, and it's obviously annoying to some people that I don't have a plan, I don't have a drive in that area. But on the other hand, when I do get doing something I'm interested in doing, I can be very single-minded about getting it done. which is it is an important trait. But again, I'm still 80-20 or 90-10. I'm not a perfectionist. So following through to the end sometimes means you have to you put something down and come back to it, and put it down and come back to it. And I want to show things now, type of things, like the current project with the sustain pedals. I did a quick live thing. Haven't done the full YouTube video on it yet. So I took, I saw as a sustain pedal at Walmart was only $10. I thought that was good value. So they had a big pile of them, so I bought 13 of them, and then used a little microcontroller to build something that means I could now a 13-note MIDI pedal board. You can see it in the corner here. Oops, there, the blue thing here. That's the woodwork for it. Will I play? Do I need a pedal board? No. Most of the things I build, I'm not I can't really play. I can't even play the. Oops, sorry. Can't even play the. Oh my God! There we go. The keyboards. I don't play music. I'm interested in the technology of the synthesizer. I'm interested in the electronics. Since the mid-70s, I've known what VCOs and filters were. That was actually all to do with the what was it? The Doctor Who sound, the Doctor Who title sound, music. I really wanted to be able to make that sound as a Doctor Who theme, and yeah, that was basically simple. Well, to me, in my mind, I could hear how it would do various sounds. Whether it would actually work that way, but at least for me, it meant things like ring modulators and filters and oscillators. And I would listen to things like Moog Indigo, a sort of a synthy electronics music album, and I'd play it at 16 instead of 33. So I could hear all the little pops and whistles and things going on in the sound, to see and think, okay, how would you make that sound? And this is sort of when I was a teenager, even though I didn't have a synth. I was building little circuits that made noise from the magazine articles, from these monthly magazines I had access to, which were basically what would you could do obviously trivially on Google nowadays. In fact, these magazines have actually been scanned and they're actually available online. I think I can't remember what it's called, World Radio Archives or something vaguely in that direction. I could look it up and put it in the description. A great source of historic stuff. All the magazines I used to watch, read on a monthly basis, and go through and scour the adverts for components I could afford on my very small pocket money for doing a paper round on the way to school. So yeah, it's good to talk to the camera once in a while. Since I rarely get feedback on these videos, so I'll get a few likes maybe on my if I advertise on Facebook. On Twitter, basically, well, now X, I've probably got about 23 people of the 170 followers or so, logically, who actually would watch this video through a link. I don't think anybody's going to watch it from beginning to end. If you do, welcome. So yes, this is mostly for my kids, etc., as a legacy project. So many people now, at least now I'm in my 60s. A lot of the people I know are, seriously ill or have issues, or know people who are seriously ill. And even having just recently moved and started to unpack a lot of our boxes, I say, okay, to my wife, what's this? Why is this here? Why do we keep it? And so we think, yeah, she'll say, oh, it was, Auntie Whatsits. And I'd say, okay, fine, we need to get that documented so that our children, when they're going through this stuff in a few years, when we've passed on, they'll know that it's their great aunt's Whatsit, and then they can decide whether or not they want to keep it. Otherwise, yeah, it'll just end up in trash somewhere. Otherwise, and yeah, memories are ephemeral. Yeah, unless you sort of make recordings, and at the moment, something like YouTube seems to be reasonable in terms of it's going to be around for a few more years at least. You can never be sure. Things come and go all the time. I will probably download this video and burn it at least to a CD at least once, store it on a hard disk at some point, just to make sure that I have a copy of everything that I've uploaded, just in case those services go away. I regularly download my camera when I take photographs. I regularly download them onto the computer, so I don't use the cloud storage. I don't think internet access is something that you always should take for granted. You should always have some other backup that's not ephemeral as the cloud. It could just go away one day and you'd lose everything. So I'm definitely a proponent of having a hard copy of stuff. So yeah, feel free to make copies if you're at all interested in what's going on in this video. Otherwise, I'll just go back to trying to do unique things. I try not to do covers. Any music I do is sort of purely something I like, something I preferably is unique to what I'm working on. So if I accidentally cover someone else's work, sorry, I didn't mean to. I prefer to have unique stuff. Although at some point, you can't, a filter sweep is a filter sweep, and everybody does similar ones, even though yours is going to be absolutely unique. So we'll see. I would like to enable people to learn some of the simple things like electronics that I've learnt over the years. Today's subject is huge, and there's a lot of advantages, a lot of things you have in it which I didn't have back then. But that's also a curse. So yeah, stay tuned. I'll try to put out little projects now and again. Nothing should be too expensive. It shouldn't take too long. Hopefully it'll give you enough interest to work at it, to you have some basic mastery of it, and then you can really let your ideas explode. Thank you.